Welcome to chapter 11 of my novella, A Series of Miseries, a detective story, work of fiction. I hope you'll enjoy it. I hope you will go back and read it from the beginning. You can find it on Amazon.com, either in Kindle version or as a paperback. It'd be good reading maybe on an afternoon, maybe at the beach or in the mountains, or a snowy day coming up. So I'm gonna read from this chapter. Read this chapter today, and you can follow from me from the previous chapter. So, chapter 11, New Oxford, Pennsylvania, has a traffic circle in the center of town. The circle contains a sort of park where local fairs are held, and people sit and walk and talk. Red had even seen artists, his wife was one, sit and paint the old buildings in nice weather. There's a coffee shop on the corner of Route 30, the Lincoln Highway as it is called, and the shop has changed hands a few times, but it was comforting in some strange way for Red to visit it from time to time. 2 days after Red's visit to Daquan, he sat as he usually did at his computer, excuse me, and listened to Mantovani's rendition of Harlem Nocturne and looked at pictures of his daughter that he had saved his computer. He'd already played with his cats, holding them, calling them by name, and brushing them, and playing with them, holding a wand with feathers on it as they chased it, and played hunt and kill before they ate their breakfast. He wanted his cats to be healthy, not just physically, but mentally, and they were not little people in fur coats, but cats who needed to express their catness to be happy. There he was sitting at the computer, and he decided to go out for coffee. It would be a nice walk to the center of town. He sat at a table outside, sipping his coffee like many other old men and women did at that very spot every day, watching the traffic on Route 30 coming and going to and from York and Gettysburg. By chance, on this day, he saw someone that made his heart jump a bit. She didn't notice him at first, but as she walked by, he called out to his ex-wife. I'm sorry, excuse me. Hello, Julia, he said in a matter of fact manner, as he was used to seeing her every day when he hadn't seen her in months. When her daughter was killed herself those decades ago, he crashed and burned, destroying their marriage. In his own grief and self loathing, blaming her suicide on his terrible failure at being a father, he missed some important facts. For one, he was not there for his wife, who was also suffering, and in his own suffering, he became the center of the world, and everything else, including her pain, was just the collateral damage. He drank heavily in those days, and although he was never a violent drunk, he was emotionally detached when he was in his cups. He was just never there for Julia. She loved him, but she couldn't take the incredible loneliness that came along with being with him while she too had to deal with awful grief. Second, she also refused to wallow in his self hatred. In her mind, they weren't bad parents and they did everything they knew how to do. What happened blindsided them. Julia had remarried a few years after their divorce, but her husband had recently died of a heart attack or something related to it. Red wasn't sure. She had seemed happy in her second marriage, or reasonably so. He let her go. It was all he could do. He loved her, but he could do nothing for her. She loved him too, but could not bear his darkness, a darkness that surrounded him at all times and in every way. She was a classic beauty even in her 60s. Her bearing was all grace and class, an exceptional woman. She had short dark hair and flashing dark eyes in her youth, and although her hair was now gray, her eyes still reflected that youthful vigor and love of life. Care to join me for a cup? I'll buy, Red said with a smile. Julia returned his smile and agreed to sit down with him. After he returned with what he knew she liked without even having to ask her, he sat down and spoke to her. I'm sorry about your husband. His name was Bill. You never said his name. You've never said his name, she replied firmly. Yeah, that way I didn't have to acknowledge him as a real person, I guess. He looked down at his coffee and then back at her face, amazed at how much he still loved her almost over a decade and a half. Was it a heart attack? She had a tear in her eye, which she brushed away carefully. He never really recovered from COVID last year. He was on a ventilator for a month. But yes, it was a heart attack, although they marked it off as COVID like so many others. I guess what's what brought the heart attack on, they would say. Julia snapped her head up and looked Red directly in the eyes. Say her name, Red. Say Kelly. I bet you haven't said her name in 10 years. Red looked down at his coffee. Yes, Kelly. We did the best we could, Red. We did the best we could, Julia lamented, choking back tears. Yeah, but it didn't stop her from killing herself, did it? Now Red was choking back tears. Julia shook her head. She didn't handle the breakup well. I sent her into a tailspin. I was blindsided by how she was in such emotional pain. I never would have thought she would do that, though.
Red's mind exploded. This was new information after 2 decades. It was new information he neither wanted nor could process. What breakup? Do you mean she was in a relationship with someone and that this happened because of that? Why didn't you let me know? I didn't know this. Julia patted his hand. You never listened to anything I or anyone else said after she died. I'm sure you knew or should have known at some point that this was all about a love affair gone bad. Our lives and hers were destroyed, or at least we thought that way because of an affair. With who? Who was it? Red, imagining finding some guy in his mid 40s now, some middle aged, balding, overweight jerk, and kicking his ass up and down the street at least until he needed oxygen.
She refused to tell me. She said we might know the person. I think it was an older man, much older. She just refused to tell me his name. Didn't you read my statement, the one I gave Zumi? Julia shook her head at Red's cluelessness. No, I didn't read it. Zumi didn't want to make things worse for me. He said you didn't say anything that would help me. I just accepted that. I guess he was right. I would have killed the guy, just killed him. Julia finally stood up after a few moments of awkward silence. I have to go. I hope we can see each other again. Red smiled finally. You should come over. I've got cats now. Julia laughed. You and cats. I'm surprised you aren't raising a cheetah or some lion cubs. I thought about it, he said. Julia left, and Red hoped they would see each other again. He was struck again at how much he loved her. There had never been anyone else, nor could there be. So we'll work on chapter 12 next time, and I thank you for watching.